you realize as the parent, I always use Andre Agassi as the example. It's like, great, he wins the US Open. He makes lots of money. He's very famous. But if you read his book and he says he's miserable the whole time, if I'm the parent, I don't call that success. I think, to your point, if people can even get in touch with things and people and environments that they want to be in and make them feel good, I mean, what else could we hope for, especially as the parent?
Welcome to Living 4D with Paul Chek. Today, Paul talks with volleyball legend Gabrielle Reece. A world-renowned athlete, New York Times best-selling author, wife to surfer icon Laird Hamilton, and mother, Gabrielle was a former professional beach volleyball player and Nike's first female spokeswoman. She is an avid proponent of empowering people to take responsibility for their own health, and she walks her talk as a truly authentic example of healthy living.
All right, well, it's really exciting for me to share Gabrielle Reece with all of you. I know probably most of you know who Gabrielle is, and I refer to her as Gabby, as most people do. Gabby, is that a name that you let people use with interviews?
Absolutely. It's shorter. It's friendlier. Why not? If we get into a debate, you might have to call me Gabrielle, but right now we're good, Paul.
Well, if you and I get into a debate, I'm sure that it would be with the intention of bringing something beautiful out for everybody.
I'm into nuanced conversation. I'm okay with that. Yeah,
cool. Well, I'm just trying to remember what year it was you and I started working together. Do you remember?
Yeah, I do. 2000 either 2001 or 2002.
Right.
Yeah, around there.
So we did a fair bit of work to help you. At that time, you were transitioning into golf, if I remember right.
Yeah. So it was actually a little bit prior to that, actually. Yeah, no, it's about right, 2001. Yes, I was attempting to switch my, as you would say, my volleyball software to golf, a little more golf software.
Yes, which, as we both know, that's not an easy transition. The motor skills are very, very different. But we did do some great work, and I don't recall what happened with your golf career. Was it that you got pregnant, or what was children? Well, children was part of it, and I've said this many times about what I learned. One of the many humbling things I learned about the quest, because the whole golf adventure was sort of an invitation where someone said, "Hey, we'll pay for your training to see if you can just get your card." And there's the idea of prolonging my athletic career was sort of really intriguing for me. And what I realized, that one of the many things I realized was, I think most of us are good at something because we fall in love with it. We do it naturally. And then as a byproduct, we arrive at a place where we sort of know how to do it. And this puts the objective in front of the passion. And I think that was one of the mistakes. So I can easily say, yes, Reece was born and it took away from golf. But the reality is I don't know that I was in love with golf. And I think that that's the most important thing when you're pursuing something, is you have to have a genuine passion and sort of connection for your reasons as to why you're doing it. Then you even remotely might have a shot at being any good at it. But I think I'm going to do that and get good at it, that's a big mistake. Well, it's interesting you mentioned that, because that's one of the issues, or one of the concepts that I have in my list of questions to discuss with you. So we can revisit that in more detail and mine that a little bit. So just as an overview for the listeners, I worked with Gabrielle, and then Gabby referred Laird to me, and I've worked with Laird on multiple occasions, and you guys have reached out to me over the years whenever you had questions or anything like that. So we've maintained our relationship and our working relationship in a kind of a natural, organic way, and it's really been lovely to be able to support you guys whenever I could, and to watch both of your careers grow and develop. It's been, a number of years.
Yeah, well, Paul, I think, Laird and I have talked a lot about this, that the position that we got through, whether it's through sport or, the other different ventures that we were on, I think having access to people like yourself, even though there's only one of you, has certainly been one of the, the kind of the greatest gifts, because it's, the brilliance, or to have someone to go to questions with, because, we're always seeking answers. And so I'm really grateful to you to be able to call you and say, hey, I'm, experiencing this or feeling this. And if you have knowledge about it, you share it. And if you don't, you sort of send me on and say, well, look over there, kind of thing. So that's always, we both really have a lot of respect for you, but it's also just a gift. It's like sometimes you feel like you're in the middle of the dark and you go, okay, I have someone to call.
Yeah, it is great. And
do you have anyone to call?
I do, actually. A lot of them I call on spirit phone. I work that way. So I go into meditation and just ask my soul to connect me to the great teachers. And because I'm clairvoyant, I actually am able to see them and talk to them. And I spend a lot of my time. In fact, I have a daily practice of connecting to each of the great teachers and sharing my love and appreciation and respect for their work. And so I do have those, but yes, I do have people that I call. Dr. Sherry Tenpenny is my house consultant on anything to do with vaccination issues, and she's a genius on that. And Dr. Cliff Oliver is someone who's helped me teach my holistic lifestyle coaching program. He did for a number of years, but he's the master I know of at functional medicine. So I share a lot of clients with him, especially because I get a fair number of disease cases and people in terminal cancer and various situations where there's no way any one of us can know all the things we need to know. So over the years, I've just sort of kept my eye on who's really good at what. And fortunately, a lot of these people have also used me as a consultant. So I have a nice reciprocal relationship with quite a number of highly intelligent and capable people with unique skill sets. So yes, it's been, I think I function just the same way you and Laird do.
Yeah, I think you're ahead though, Paul.
Well, if I'm ahead, it's just that I know when I need to ask somebody instead of hurting myself, or, when you're a therapist like I am and a coach that gets deeply involved with people's lives, if you're wise, when giving advice that's not founded on solid experience can be dangerous. So I always sort of let my soul guide me as to when to bow out and make referrals so that everybody has the best outcome. One of the things I wanted to really do with you today, because I haven't had a chance to do this with a woman, is take a little trip on the hero's journey with you and take our listeners with us. It's there's not nearly as much exposure for what I would refer to as the female heroes in our culture as there is the male heroes. And you've accomplished quite a lot in your lifetime. You're an inspiration to millions of men and women alike. So I'd love it if you could start by sharing some of your childhood developmental experiences that led to your athletic, modeling, writing, acting, and TV hosting careers.
Mm-hmm. Well, listen, I always say that I have felt like my notion for survival was always very powerful within, sort of within me. It felt really important. And so I think, first of all, I grew up mostly in the formative years in the Caribbean, which there's, it's warm. There's an activeness to it. My mother was very athletic. So I was around people who were, moving, nothing crazy though. And, I dabbled a little bit in volleyball in sort of 9th and 10th grade, nothing formal. And then I was actually moved out of the Caribbean in 11th grade. And because I was 6'3" at 15 and I have a, relatively athletic physique, the assumption is, oh, you're an athlete. And quite frankly, I I feel like in a lot of ways, and probably not so unusual for that age, you're spending a lot of time trying to be less than, you don't want to be noticed or stick out or be unusual. And so my physicality I had an interesting relationship with it. I didn't have an issue with it. I just didn't want to be singled out because of it. But then when I moved to Florida and I got involved with athletics, and it also gave me this sort of quasi family to be a part of. I think that was a really powerful association for me with athletics, was purpose and family, a place, something I could contribute a skill to if I could get good enough. And so I think my relationship around sports has been very different. Some people it's to win. Some people it's because they're just so naturally competitive. And for me, I think I was really looking for a location to feel a part of. And also I really like the work. I like the grind of it. There's something in my personality where it's sort of, whether it's good or bad, it sort of makes you feel worthy, and it sort of makes you feel like you're being as honest with yourself as you can be in a world that is confusing to you. And then it branched out from there. So I think I started in sports that way and for that reason. And then I went to college on a scholarship, and the only way I could have afforded to go to university was through athletics. And so that sort of just led me to the next place. And it was really pivotal because also, for women at times, it's if you say, hey, your beauty or your aesthetic is your currency. I think for a lot of women, you kind of go, well, that's easy. And I had a very beautiful mother, and I realized that currency is pretty limiting. And it's short-lived. So I was really interested in developing other currencies and developing a work ethic and a talent, a skill. And so that's what I discovered in college, was the athlete in myself. But I'll be honest with you, even at this time in my life and all that I've gone through, I have never looked at myself as a really good athlete. I think I can incorporate information into movement, but I never was like, oh, I'm a really badass athlete. And so I think that's probably part of it too. And maybe it isn't gotten better because living with Laird for almost 24 years, you kind of go, well, I think he's a good athlete,
I think that's a reasonable evaluation.
I swear. I mean, sometimes I'm like, I really have, it's funny. I've really always had that internal thing of, because I've also been around so many great athletes, male and female. And so you never view yourself as like that. But if you said, hey, you need to do this and move it kind of 2 inches that way and make your body, move this way. And in a sport like volleyball, which felt pretty good to me, I could do that. But I have always fought my body, my lever length, in some ways feeling not coordinated at all, kind of all these weird mishmash of things. So it was interesting.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting to hear you say these things because, most of our time together was very focused and working on, therapeutic things and conditioning things. So we didn't get a chance to talk about a lot of the kinds of things I'm getting to share with you today. So it's exciting for me too. But in my sort of, I did a little bit of research just to kind of freshen up on more of a well-rounded picture of Gabrielle Reece. And I noticed that several of your college records from volleyball are still standing today. Is that correct?
It is. Yeah.
So my point is that, you're quite humble for a woman who's really achieved quite a lot athletically.
I think I've had this conversation, actually I had it with Carrie Walsh, and I had a lot of athletes around me that were groomed to be champions. And I was not groomed to be a champion. I was not raised thinking I was especially good at anything. I was never put down. That's not my point. No one ever sort of said, maybe you have some special talents, which I think in the long run has actually been really good for me. But it also made there's parts of, some people are naturally like, I'm a winner, I crush people, I win, I feel good. I think women are conflicted with that a little bit more. And then unless, I always see certain women that have lots of brothers and they don't have that issue. But I think it was very hard for me to learn how to win, to beat other people, to accept that. It's never really been my thing. And I think also, I know this sounds really strange, but my vision has always been on the horizon. And so I think sometimes when you're winning and losing in the moment, like when the ball's in play, that has to be the most important thing in the world. But my ability to step way, way back when it was all done was pretty good. And I realized even if you were the best, it's not sustainable. So have a really healthy relationship with it. But in ways, I think that limited me, for sure.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I've worked with many athletes whose careers were ended by injury or illness or just performance plateaus, and they ended up just not being able to continue to work as a professional athlete. And they go through a very intense life transition because they don't know who they are without the limelight and without the identification with themselves as their performance, be it hockey or baseball or whatever it might be. So when people do have that, well, I'll call it a championship mindset or a champion mindset, but they don't have enough development or awareness or coaching to deal with what comes after that sense of identification in that role, it really can level people.
Oh, I've seen it all around me. And I think for me too, I was so interested in the pursuit of excellence, but I was also in a way a little shrewd. I'll say this, where I've always been looking ahead, and I was like, I'm not going to get caught without choices and options. And so I've always looked ahead and sort of tried to be present, but also to connect my future naturally with where I think I'm going and who I'm becoming, and also put time into those skills so that when I arrive at those places, I at least had a little bit of momentum on my side. So it's weird, right? It's like this mixed bag of maybe it hurt me a little bit as an athlete, but maybe overall it's more gentle on me as a person. And also it's liberated me from a story or from an identity. I think for me, it's like, how do you keep the ego and the story and the identity in check enough so that you can really hear who you are today and sort of listen to who you'd like to be tomorrow, but also be okay with the lights on you, the lights off you, the lights back on you. It's bright, it's dark. That your life is in it's your experiences and your feeling, your sense of enjoyment is more from the inside out versus the outside in. And so that is something I think I naturally had without knowing how to verbalize it. And then as you get older and you're trying to do work on yourself, it starts to really become apparent that, these are things we're all going to navigate.
Yeah, it's what you've just described is actually probably one of the biggest paradoxes in human life, and that's the ego-story relationship, because one, without our ego, we have no sense of identification.
Right.
And without our story, we have no sense of life, meaning, or identification. So, without our ego, we really have no sense of self. And without that sense of self, there can be no sense of other. And therefore, the capacity to love becomes crippled. But then we have all this kind of new age questing for enlightenment, which is in a lot of kill the ego concepts, which I don't really think are often very well thought out, because most people don't realize that the ego might very possibly the greatest gift that the universe can give you, for the simple fact that without it, you have no experience of self and you have no capacity to love, because without an ego, there's no subject, object, or I-thou relationship. So there's really quite a maturation process. And it sounds to me like you've walked that tightrope quite well, where it's kind of like being on a shamanic journey. And when the medicine kicks in, it dissolves the ego's capacity to filter information. So all the information in your unconscious starts flowing in, and information from the superconscious starts flowing in. And if a person's ready for that kind of experience, they can maintain the balance between being present, but also experiencing themselves as so much more than the encapsulated ego. And it takes a hell of a lot of spiritual training, legitimate spiritual training, to get to the point where you can have that magical experience of having an ego and a sense of self as necessary for loving and caring for yourself and playing your part in relationships, but also knowing when to let that part of you go so that you don't create borders that actually create limitations for yourself and in relationships.
Yeah, and I also think it's being more in touch with noticing when the ego is the one that's responding, right? And it's interesting because I think in a way, as I've grown older, my ego is more powerful in the way that my sense of self does. I do feel stronger. I do feel less apologetic, if you will, for taking up space. But the capacity to love or to yield or to apologize or to not react has improved as well. I think what was helpful also was I had a lot of examples around me maybe on what wasn't working when I was growing up. And then I had some really great coaches that were good influence. Just being in an athletic environment was a great teacher for me. And then, meeting Laird at 25, I think also probably helped impact me. Well, of course it did. It pushed me into this other way, because as strong of it as an ego Laird has, definitely to do what he does and to believe he can do those kinds of things, is actually as egoless as Laird is, because he's with Mother Nature so much, I think he has a deep humility that he also brings into the relationship. That was a really good example for me, because I was really prideful and afraid to say sorry and afraid to be wrong. And Laird was really good about showing me that there was safety in that, and that you could have that dynamic. So I think that also really helped me pursue looking at it that way versus protecting myself and fortifying and, keeping score and needing to be correct. And, when you have a partner that everybody's flawed and you go through things, but ultimately you go, there's a safety here and I can learn how to be more like this. It was really helpful for sure.
Yeah, that's lovely. And I've got questions where we explore some of those things more as well, because I think those are very important things. A couple things that I wanted to talk about before we move forward. You described not really being overly comfortable with the idea of creating losers. And I think that's not only a feminine quality, but it's, the mother archetype doesn't want children to be made into losers. In other words, a mother never likes seeing her kids beat on each other and leave one of the children more damaged or feeling with less self-esteem or less intact. And I think women are naturally, inherently connectors. It's the yin energy. The woman is about holding the home together, keeping the circle from breaking, if you look at it as an archetypal issue. And I came up with a concept that I'd like to share with you that I think if it was taught to people earlier on, it could really help a lot of people, especially athletic people. And the concept is, instead of winners and losers, I feel that we should operate on the concept of winners and learners. Sure. So that instead of feeling like we lost, we imagine being in a surf contest with Laird Hamilton and feeling like, oh my God, I'm a loser. Well, a person like that may never enter another surf contest that he's in because you're not likely to win. But if we went with the concept of winners and learners, then the child or the individual could be taught to study or to say, okay, what is it about this person who just beat me in this competition, whatever it may be? And what were the technical things that they did different or did better than me? So if we walked away with this awareness that, wow, we've just found a new mentor to study or somebody who you could make friends with or hire, then it would really, I think, change the mindset, because I really do believe that we damage people with this sort of bravado, the ass kicker approach.
Yeah.
And I think it leaves a lot of kids with low self-esteem, especially, in sports. Like I was in boxing and martial arts and rode in the rodeo as a kid. And some of those sports, the loser element of it can be debilitating because it can mean the end of your career. But if you have the concept of being a learner, it sort of changes the whole context.
Yeah, I mean, in a sport like fighting, it's probably a little harder because when you lose, you probably also got beat up.
Yeah, most likely.
Getting your bell rung over and over. But I think, the other interesting thing about what you're saying is what it does too is it demystifies someone's power. So if you have an athlete that's really good, let's say, and you're going to compete against them and they beat you, but you say, I'm going to study them. I'm going to embrace the fact that they're powerful, that they're good at something, but they're maybe naturally even better than I am. Like no matter what I do, right? They might be just naturally, they've got it, this thing that I don't have.
Yeah.
But still being willing to have a relationship with that idea gives you a lot of power, because you now are deconstructing the situation from this other point of view. Instead of they're the winner, I'm the loser, they're better than me, I'm not. It's like, wow, they're very quick, or their feet are like this, or their jumping abilities like that. So now you're demystifying it. You are learning. And I know it sounds strange, but I think there's something to celebrating other people for being badass that makes it a lot better for us instead of fighting it. Because I think when we see people that we are threatened by because they've, for whatever reason, biologically, it triggers us in something. When we can go, wow, I'm going to celebrate this person. It also gives you a chance to study it. So I think that would be an excellent concept to spread to people. It's funny because I don't even know how to, like with my kids, when they're in sports, I'm like, I don't really care about the outcome. I just care that you are doing your best for yourself, like whatever that means. And my youngest daughter just said to me the other day, she's like, I can't stand that you don't care if I get straight A's or I win. And I go, okay, but I've been down that road and I just know in the end, is that going to work? Or if I just try to give you the best environment and support you, and, if you want to talk to me about stuff, but it's just interesting. I have one kid who's like basically wanting me to be like, up her butt. And then, you're always navigating something. But I think the idea of being a learner versus a loser, there's a lot to that.
Well, yes. And I'm grateful you see the value in it. And maybe that's me planting a seed in your head to help me share that concept with the world, because you certainly reach a lot of people that I don't reach. Just due to our different circles and professional vehicles. So,
yes,
I have meditated on it quite a bit. And it's interesting that you say that about your daughter, because one time I was having a conversation with Paul Jr., and I can't remember what was going on in his life, but something was challenging him. And I said something like, look, it's okay. As long as you're happy with yourself, I'm not expecting you to save the world or try to outperform me or whatever. And he got upset at me. He said, why don't you expect more from me? And I said, I've learned the hard way that the number one thing that you can gain in your life is the ability to have sustainable happiness. And if that means that you're a mechanic or that you're a gardener or a world leader, it doesn't matter to me. But if you climb this so-called tree of success and find yourself at the end of the journey, as Joseph Campbell says, with a ladder on the wrong wall, you'll be an unhappy person, and that won't be nourishing to me.
That's right. And I always remind, like, we just took our daughter Reece, who's 15. She basically moved out of the house yesterday, somewhat, temporarily, but for the next several months to live with a tennis family. Like, that's what she's doing. Right. And the woman who's super intense, this tennis coach and her husband, and they're like, okay, and this and that. I go, listen, I'm Reese's mom. I'm here to support her in her development as a human being and for her to understand what she makes her feel good as a person. I'm not here to make her a champion, whatever that is. It's like, I'm her mom. I'm not, her coach. Because they were like trying to go over like, almost, and it's great because that's what you want. That's her role in Reese's life. But you realize as the parent, I always use Andre Agassi as the example. It's like, great. He wins the US Open. He makes lots of money. He's very famous. But if you read his book and he says he's miserable the whole time, if I'm the parent, I don't call that success. I think, to your point, if people can even get in touch with things and people and environments that they want to be in and make them feel good, I mean, what else could we hope for, especially as the parent?
Well, it would sure change the world. I mean, we're going to get into some of these issues later, so I won't dig in now. But I think you're intuiting what I wanted to talk to you about. One of the things I didn't realize is that your father was from Trinidad. So was he a colored man?
Yeah, he was. Are we allowed to say that anymore, Paul? I get so confused now. I never know.
I don't know. To me, it's all God. I love every color in the rainbow, and my two favorite colors are black and white because everything's in between them. So the reason I'm asking is because I didn't realize that, and I was wondering if that had any effect on you. Because when I first met you, and to this day, I wouldn't have known that until I read that, because you don't really have any of the indicators that I wouldn't look at you and say, oh, she must be half this or half that. Yeah. But a lot of people get really caught they get caught in that no man's land where nobody loves them, it seems. And I was wondering if you ever dealt with any of that.
I mean, listen, I on paper, or to just look at me, I'm, a tall, blonde, white woman as far as like, my physical outward appearance. My father was actually what they call now biracial. So my grandfather was black and my grandmother was white. And my dad, to see him, you would recognize that he had a diverse background. He was dark, but he had green eyes and a very thick West Indian accent. But for me, because I grew up in the West Indies, but I did not grow up with my father. My father passed away when I was 5. And prior to that, I was not living with him. So I got more stuck into you're giant than you have a multiple, sort of diverse background. And because I grew up in a West Indian culture that was very diverse, everybody, it was never really a big deal.
Well, that was the next thing on my list, actually, is I didn't realize your father had died. As I was searching things on the internet about you, it said your father died in a plane crash. Is that what happened?
Yeah, he was, it was towards his birthday, and he was living in California going to school, and he flew down to see family in Southern California, and then flew back up to go north in a small plane. And he got caught in a very bad storm, and the plane crashed, and him and a girlfriend that he was with passed away.
Well, that's something you and I share in common. I don't know if you know, but my father drowned when I was 8.
How did he drown?
My father was a professional drag racer and a competitive dancer, and pretty wild from what my mother tells me. Mm-hmm. And on Christmas Eve, late at night, 1969, apparently it was very stormy, and he was at the end of, I believe it was Santa Monica Pier, and some of his friends bet him that he couldn't swim from the end of the pier to the shore because the waves were quite bad.
Were they sober?
No.
Okay.
my grandfather told me later that in his autopsy, they found cocaine in his blood and quite a bit of alcohol.
Yeah.
But he must have gotten slammed into a pier because it took him 8 days to find him at sea. And he was pretty much eaten by all the sea creatures. And the only way my mother could identify him was the tattoo on his arm. But the reason I'm bringing that up is that was a tough time for me. And I'm wondering how that experience affected you and maybe rippled its way through your life.
Well, I think, when I was 2, I didn't live with either one of my parents. I lived with a very generous couple that grew up with my mother, neighborhood kids from New York, and they took me in until I was 7. So there was a period of time that I didn't live with either one of my parents. So I had it, I've shared this not very often, but if, let's say, for example, I was coming home each day to my father, and then one day he wasn't there, I think it would have impacted me in a really obvious way. That way it would have been much harder. But because I was already not living with either one of my parents, there was a part of me that was sort of, I don't want to say protected from those kinds of feelings, but I had already had to go through a loss when I wasn't living with them at 2.5. I moved back in with my mother when I was 7, but I think if anything, it just probably made me even stronger in that way of, I had really lovely male figures in my life. My stepfather was quite nice. He was more like a friend. The gentleman that I lived with, the couple, he was the guy who taught me, my Uncle Joe taught me to ride a bike, and, we do punch ups and stuff like that. But I think I was always very, that's, I think, also why I probably developed a bit of the male masculine side of my personality, because it was probably necessary.
Yes, I was curious. My father took off and left my mother. By the time my mother was 18, she had 3 kids, and he was out hanging out and making love to his dance partners, and, basically had very little contact with him after about the age of 3, which I almost have zero memories of. But when he died, it was like my stepfather and my mother just seemed to not tell us anything. And I had this deep sense of, well, what happened? And I literally remember for probably about 3 years looking in every car, everywhere I went, I looked for him. And it left me feeling very, very alone. And I think for me, it did the same thing. Actually, it made me, it put some kind of fire in me where I don't really know how to describe it in words, which is rare for me, but it definitely made me realize in some way that I had to take care of myself in the world, because mommy and daddy weren't always going to be there.
That's right.
So, you've done, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, I was going to say, though, it's interesting. Loss is hard when you're young, but I actually feel that if you are in a life's track that you experience it younger than later, there's something that I have friends that have not experienced real loss until they're full adults. And I see that in a way it's actually harder for different reasons.
Well, I think children are much more adaptive to most any situation. They don't have a bunch of preconceived notions, or they're not so loaded up with expectations.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, as I think you would agree, we have a lot of children in adult bodies today that play the role of adults, but have not developed their individuation or an authentic sense of a healthy ego. So they're still very dependent upon parents and others. And so when they lose a parent, it's quite devastating to them, because now they really do have to grow up.
Yeah.
You've done a lot of different things to express yourself creatively and professionally. I'm looking at your career of athletic career is phenomenal. Modeling career, I remember years ago reading that you were the only elite athlete that was also a supermodel. you've written several books. Oh, I got to say, Gabby, something special just happened.
What's that?
A beautiful female bobcat just came right in front of my window, and they're very, very shy.
Yeah.
And they only show up occasionally. So that's a real special event. So whatever you do when you finish this interview, go on Google and search bobcat as spirit animal, because I know that cats come to bring you a message.
Okay, I take it.
They're beautiful. Have you ever seen bobcats?
I have, actually. We have very seldom, we have them around here because, like you said, they're very timid.
Yeah. Yeah, I've probably had 6 visitations in 7 years, and I sometimes do a little prayer to the spirit of the bobcats to tell them I'd love to see them. And I haven't seen one in a good year. And so here I am talking to you, and it shows up. So there's something, that's a synchronicity. So there you go. But to go back to what I was saying, you've had a great career in acting, modeling. You've written several books. You're a TV host. I mean, you really have sort of a Tour de France resume. Mm-hmm. And so when we look at it from the perspective of a hero's journey, there's the initial phase that we go out into these experiences and to create and cultivate ourselves in these different ways is referred to as the call to adventure. So I'm wondering, what are some times when you were moving into your athletics or moving into your writing or your acting or your hosting where you had that call, that sense of, it's time for me to do this? What rose up in you and carried you through?
I think I always, even since I was, 18 or 19, I think I've always been in an active prayer of, if I'm supposed to recognize something, or if there's something out there that is fit for me, that I can do a good job, that I can contribute to, not only make it be known, but make me have the wherewithal to recognize, and then maybe just enough courage or audacity, whichever one, to think, yeah, okay, I can do that. And so things have often presented themselves to me. And when they feel right in my gut, and I just go for it. And sometimes listen, when I was competing at the highest level, I was flying around, interviewing other people for MTV and other shows. So I often think that we are so many different people at one time. And I think that's the other thing, because I grew up in an unconventional way and nobody said, what are you going to do? Like, who are you going to be? I never thought I only had to be one thing at one time. And so I've often flowed in and out of all these roles, throughout a week, if you will. And that feels most comfortable, because then it gives me good perspective and view on the other roles or hats I'm wearing. And so I sort of have always, sort of done it that way.
Well, that's beautiful. I think that's good for people to hear, because, one of the sources of fear and limitation is parental expectation. And you're going to be this, you need to be a doctor or a lawyer, or you're going to embarrass the family. And I've had to do therapy on countless people that have, ended up having challenges that I track back to those very insecurities and things like that. So that what I hear you saying is that you allowed yourself to explore diversity without limiting yourself. And that gave you a sense that you were capable of doing what you needed to do, and you just let it flow from there. Is that a fair interpretation?
Yes. And I always went in with the spirit of whatever amount of work it needs, or if I'm coached, if you will. Because even I did a show for NBC, and literally I had to be coached because it was 20 cameras. And even though I've been doing TV for 20 years, they're like, yeah, no, this is different. You need to be coached. This is something that's comfortable for me. I'm not interested in, no, I understand. Oh, I've got it. No, yeah, I know how to do it. I've always been receptive to people sharing suggestions or constructive criticism or what have you. Now, having said that doesn't, but I also only allow myself to be in certain safe situations to then say, okay, I'm ready to be deconstructed and coached. It isn't just, head snapping every person that tells me everything and I go with it. So there's also always having discernment. But I also want to admit, because I think it's important to be transparent when you talk about this stuff to people, that fear and wanting to secure the world that I live in and my future was also something that made me really pay attention. So it would be great if I could say, well, yes, I felt like I had all these gifts or things I wanted to express. And so I checked them all out. A lot of it was, I think I have a couple skills and talents, and this will help me secure my life because my life was so upside down. So I've tried to substitute, fear for curiosity and, other things as I've gotten older. But I will admit that in the beginning, man, I was just trying to make it happen.
Well, I was too. I think we all go through that phase, especially, when we leave home and we have to make it in the world and figure out who we are, that we really have to deal with the realities of how world the big is without, our family or rich uncles to support us. And once again, you're leading right into my next question, which is in most any hero's journey, there are challenges, tests, allies, real or perceived enemies that usually require the help of a mentor to navigate. So I'm wondering if you can share what some of your challenges, tests were, or challenges within yourself that you overcame, and who were some of the mentors that had a real positive impact on your life and your ability to get through some of the obstacles that you worked through?
Well, it's interesting. I whatever title people want to put on, is it the universe? Is it God? Whatever. I will say this, even though there were times that I didn't fully understand, like, why couldn't I have it, leave it to Beaver? Why was, my childhood had this level of instability? But when I really paid attention, there were always supporting characters. So, for example, friends of my mother, this couple, Ron and Elise, they had 2 sons. I went to school with them. They sort of, why would the original people take me? And they had no children of their own. I was a difficult child from 2 to 7. So I've always had these people along the way, coaches in high school. And then my coach in college, Cecile Renaud, who's still a very dear friend of mine. I've always had really, sort of these monumental times, kind of angels that were put into my life and helped, guide me, love me, remind me during the journey. And so those were really big gifts to me that I certainly really even recognize more as an adult. But I'd say, Cecile was one of the most obvious. I had a basketball coach in college, Dean Souls. And, Cecile taught me, what was hard for me was I didn't want to be singled out. I never thought of myself as special. Some of my teammates were not particularly nice to me because I was working and sort of getting this, attention. And, She was the one who taught me, first of all, you're to be totally accountable. And then she said to me one time, she said, listen, I have 12 kids on a team, 6 play at once, 8 in total, 4 are probably pissed. So what I do is I work really hard. I be as honest with myself as I can be. And I make decisions that I think are going to be best for the situation. And after that, she goes, I know at least one person will be happy. And she's like, me. And for a woman, right? Men do this so much. This is such a much more natural thing for men. I battled that even as a professional athlete. I never really felt overly worthy of the attention I was getting. But then I realized, listen, all you can do, and I try to teach this to young girls now, is it's like grace. None of us deserve anything. But if something's happening, say thank you and then do the best you can with it, because then you're really showing that you're honoring the moment that you're holding the torch, whatever torch that is on the block that you live, in the neighborhood that you are. And so that took me a really long time to learn. And then, Laird has been a powerful person. People like yourself and other people in, I don't call it health and fitness. I say like movement and human self-care, because it's a much bigger conversation than, what I eat and moving.
Yes.
Have been great teachers to me. I oddly have a young man in my life right now who's a friend of our entire family. He's 32. His name's Elijah. And, he's taught me quite a bit about expectation and, he's like this weird middle person between my kid's age and me. And he actually introduced me to Byron Katie. And so just sort of learning, because the kind of the pressure you put on yourself as a parent is so intense. And then even last week, my daughter Reece was like out of her mind doing schoolwork. She had the deadline. She's like listening to the worst music at the headphones, and it's just all, and I go, don't you think she's scrambling her brain? And he's like, absolutely. And then you just kind of go, exactly. So there's people all around, but I would say it started with coaches, but I would say that the universe gave me angels, if I really looked at it, all along, that as if I could have dipped and fallen, someone came up and just sort of was like, whoop, and pushed me along to the next. And I'm really grateful for that. It's like if I had said, hey, if I had this Pollyanna perfect household, hey, it was hard for a few years. And I'm so very grateful for that. And I'm even more grateful for these spirits that came in and loved me and provided me with things I needed at really important times.
Yes, that's beautiful. Well, I'm going to be asking you some questions about the transition into married life and becoming a mother. But before that, if you could summarize what you learned about life before becoming and becoming married and being a mother, what would you share for those that are in the world at this stage of their development? In other words, they're not a mother yet, they're not married yet, but
you mean they look rested and they think they know what's going on? Perfect.
Yeah, exactly. In other words, what is the wise woman say to these young people who maybe don't realize what the world's really about?
Well, and also remember, Paul, and this is something really important from your point of view and from my point of view, what young people coming up that aren't married yet, what the world that they live in and what they're contending with and dating and what have you and how they're dating, believe me when I tell you that we do not understand.
I look at them and go, I don't understand why you're doing that.
No, but believe me, we don't understand what they have to navigate. We did not have to navigate what they have to navigate. With the entrance of technology, they have something else to navigate. What I would say to any young person and even women, because listen, life is unfair. And sometimes in your favor, like to the pot, like sometimes you do very little work and something big comes your way, and sometimes you do tons of work and that doesn't feel like there's much fruits, from your labor. But I think if we spend so much time thinking life is unfair versus continuing to understand intimately what we really like. And it was easier for us to quiet the voices from the outside because there was less of them. They're getting bombarded all the time. Can they create space from themselves and the outside world to look deep within their own spirits and say, who am I really? At least in this moment, what people make me feel like I'm more of that person? What job, if I'm able to, would allow me to express that part of myself? And if there are obstacles, instead of saying, there's obstacles. Okay, well, no shit, there's obstacles everywhere in all things. Going, there's an obstacle. What can I do? What are some of the strategies I can start to formulate to move around, over, through these obstacles, versus sit back and go, it's an obstacle, it's unfair, I'm a victim, right? Like all of these things. I would say that one thing I always did as a young person, I was pretty proactive in kind of, trying to connect with where I thought I wanted to go, working towards that. taking the lumps a little bit, but then, trying to figure out how to make that happen in an honest, real way, right? Like not lying, cheating, or screwing someone over. So I think if I would tell young people anything, it would be find that time throughout the week to create that space to keep that inner voice. Because no matter what, when we get into VR and AR and all these things, we're still our biological, spiritual selves. And I think they have to actually pursue that on a greater level than certainly even you and I had to. Because when it's all done and set, when it's all said and done, it's like, it's your life. It isn't someone else's life that you should live. It is your life. And when you can even at times connect with that intention within yourself, then that can be really, really, really powerful. And I would say too that maybe force people to call you on the phone, not text, and try to find ways to still keep communicating and connecting, because at the end, it sort of feels, besides connecting with yourself, connecting with the people that you have relationships with is pretty powerful.
Yeah, I don't think me, you, or, I'm 57, and it's hard to believe at times. And I'm kind of, as I think I'm back into a second life, because I have a 3-year-old, and Angie's about 4 months pregnant now with our second one, which we just found out was a little girl. So I'm very excited.
Yeah, you're excited now, buddy.
Yeah, this will be number 3, so I know the journey already. But
no, you don't. You never parented a teenage girl, buddy. I don't care.
No, I haven't. You're right.
I'm joking, Paul. But you know what's going to be so freaking genius about you having a girl is now you're going to put all your skills to the test.
Thank you, great grandma, for the wisdom and the warning. I will.
Oh, you will.
I'll continue to do my Tai Chi and anchor myself. But the nice thing is, I'm so glad I am 57, because I don't have the urge to prove myself to the world or save the world or all the things that drove me so intensively that children were hard for me to deal with, because I was too busy trying to figure myself out. So I really feel grateful that the universe has set it up for me this way, because I feel like I can be more present and I have more empathy and compassion in me than I ever did.
Well, can I ask you a difficult question?
Of course.
Does your oldest son, can he reconcile like the dad that his siblings get versus the dad he got?
I think it's a tightrope for him. He really loves his brother. He lives in Oregon, and he flies up as regularly as he can. And he just, for example, I think he spent a week and just spends a lot of time playing with Mana, and he loves kids. So he sees the way Mana's getting a tremendous amount of love and connection and support. And Mana's also fortunate because he has 2 mothers, with me having 2 wives. So he really appreciates that, but I think it also makes him sort of reminisce on how he was raised and the pain of all that. And me being a paratrooper when he was a young boy didn't make it any easier, because I was all about, busting balls and taking the world by storm. And
yeah,
it was also a very, very stressful environment to be in, period. So you'd come home from work and it was very, very intense. And a lot of that emotion comes off of you in the household. So unfortunately, I raised him more like a soldier and less like a child. And I still feel his pain. And it's just one of those things that I just have to trust that we're all in the place and in the time that we're meant to be to get the lessons that we've came to learn. But so I continue to work on healing that pain. So yeah, it's like a double-edged sword, because it reminds him of how much tougher it was to be my child. But he also is excited that I'm able to really connect to Mana and to be there for him. So that was an interesting question and a good one.
Well, my youngest daughter is 11, but there's even moments, and I know it's a colossal waste of time, but I'm always trying to figure out how to deal with it, where let's say I've learned a lesson in the last 3 years that I didn't get to implement with my older two. It's like, sometimes you're like, darn it, like if I could have just, but I to your point, it's sort of, we're here learning the lessons that we as individuals are meant to learn. But I think it's an interesting, because I don't know that I'd have so much regret in life, but I think the one that I'm always going to be working on is, what I overdid or didn't do enough of as a parent. I just think it feels like an ongoing kind of journey that you have to work on, and because it would be easy to regret certain things, and I don't know. It's just being a parent that is the most informative if you're paying attention.
Yes, and that leads us into my next question. But I'll finish what we were talking about. Paul Jr. is 39 now.
Yeah.
So he's been out in the world longer, and for better or for worse, because if you can't grapple with your childhood pains and you don't heal them, and you get old enough that your mind starts to get rigid, it can really set you up for a lot of limitations and victim archetype behavior and things like that. So I do look back often, and I do feel some sadness, but I also remind myself that I honestly did the very best I could. I mean, he was born like 2 weeks after I turned 18. So yeah. My parents had no money. Her parents had no money. I had to go out into the world full force and just make it happen. And so I give myself empathy too, because I honestly did the very, very best I could do to keep food on the table, to create safety and security, to give him the kinds of things that I didn't have as a kid. And though I thought I was really loving him much better parenting him in a much more gentle, nurturing way, I've learned it's all relative. Like, yeah. I work with a lot of very wealthy people who are raised with a silver spoon, and they're in a lot of pain. And what you find out is it has nothing to do with money or toys or how big your house is or the kind of car you drive. It's really all, at the end of the day, boils down to connection and staying connected to the children and having them feel supported and loved through the challenges that they face. So at this point, I'm just doing my best to be there for him and also to be there for everybody. I think you reach a certain point in your life where you can see yourself in everybody. You can see yourself as a teenager. You can see yourself when you were sad, when you were overly drunk, or when you were overly out of control. And so I know for me, and that's part of my spiritual practice, is to not to judge, but to observe and say, I remember me being that way, and all I can do now is offer suggestions that one's willing to take, or just open my heart and send them all the love that I can give them, knowing that the world, isn't it's not a joyride, as you know.
No, no, it's true.
Now, in our hero's journey, the hero takes their journey into the underworld, meets the mentor, and crosses the threshold to face unique challenges. They go through ordeals, gain a reward, and return to the homeland where they have no choice but to share the wisdom they've gained with the people, or deal with the pain of not sharing it. Mm-hmm. Now that you're married, and you've been married for quite a number of years, and you're a mother, what are some of the caves you feared to enter as a wife or a mother? And what were the treasures that you have gained from entering those caves?
Well, I think before Laird, my oldest daughter is my stepdaughter, even though she's my oldest daughter. She was 4 months old when I met Laird. So the first, just in dating Laird, I had to decide. I couldn't be like, oh, well, I'm just going to have some fun with this guy. I understood that there was other responsibility attached to dating Laird, which was to be a figure for Bella that was safe and loving and sort of, to act like an adult. And so I think that was an interesting thing for me, because I always talk about the ego. So for me, I was pretty harsh about, like, when I dated, I was a pretty harsh female. I was around a lot of male professional athletes. So I thought, oh, I'm never going to, be caught with my guard down the way these girls, I want someone to treat me special and be honest with me and all these things. And so what was interesting for me was to cross over and help parent someone else's. I wasn't the first woman to give Laird a child. And, it would, it's ridiculous now, but at 25, I was like, oh, and, I wasn't his first wife. And so there was some real quick lessons, some boom, boom right on my head. Like, oh, you would never. And there you are. And I remember very quickly with Bella thinking, it's not about how I feel. It's about being a strong adult and doing the right thing by her, because she's just an innocent kid, Mm-hmm. And so that was one. And I think I was very afraid to be vulnerable, to really be vulnerable, to put Laird and my feelings for Laird, at least have it come up and down and flow through ahead of my own needs for security and survival and all these things. It actually took me almost 5 years into our relationship and, sort of 3 years of marriage to say, oh, wait a second. If you're going to do this, you have to stick your neck on the chopping block, and that's uncomfortable. And so that took me many years. It actually took until Laird and I almost divorced before we started having our own biological children. And I realized, like, what's the point? Like, what's the point of being all in your little island where you think you understand what's going to be happening? And Laird was the one who really was a great example of, like, hey man, you just gotta stick it out there. It's all a risk. Like, let's do it, And so that was one that was really a challenge for me. Another challenge for me in marriage was just, it wasn't, and you hear people say this all the time. It had to stop being about what was right. And it had to be about, well, if we're going to be in this relationship, then what is the solution, or what are the steps it's going to take to enhance either whatever conflict we're in or just the environment in general? It's sort of like, it's like, if you want to come home to somebody who's smiling or seems happy to see you, guess what? You have to participate in that. So that means when you come home, be a person that is like, you'd be happy to see. And, it was all these sort of realizations about, like, you don't arrive because you have a heavy chemical reaction with somebody, doesn't hold through to the end. And that each day you wake up, if you have the mindset of, how can I enhance this person's life? Not how can I enhance my life? That's your job too. But what can I do to make it just more pleasant for them? Believe me, I did not think about that in the beginning of my relationship. And so when I started understanding that even if Laird wasn't doing that exactly at the same moment, that was something that was really important to do. And then with having kids, I was afraid I was nervous that I wouldn't be nurturing enough, or that I was afraid of that. And certainly with a baby, it was really fluid for me. And then the other thing I had to come to terms with was that I am nurturing and I am loving. I do it. I had to understand that it was okay to do it the way that I do it. Because I see other mothers and I go, oh, their speaking voice is so soft and they're so nice. And they want to do ballerina shows with their daughters, and like all these things that I didn't feel natural to me, certain things. And I realized that was okay, that I could understand that I love my children and I can show up for them. But you had to add an extension onto that, which is sometimes the way that they feel love is different than the language you speak. And so then you've got to start to develop a new language, so that you can connect with them. Because I can understand why parents go, well, this is how we do it in the house, and that's just the way it is, because it's so uncomfortable as a grown-up to go, my hammer worked great. It got me through all these things. It's a great tool. Now I'm trying to wash the windows. The hammer isn't the tool. I have to develop a new tool. And it's really uncomfortable when it's in the face of a teenager who's looking at you like, are you gonna or aren't you? Because then you have to reveal that you're gonna work on it. And so there's been a lot of places I didn't know I was going to have to go, or I certainly knew I probably would rather not, that I have, and I probably will continue to. And what you do find is that the more, when you're willing to look at it and keep looking at it, it does become easier. And, I react, my 11-year-old was dreadful the other night, and I reacted finally. And the next day I was driving, it takes me a minute. I was driving to school and I said, hey, Brody, I need to tell you something that I owe you an apology for last night. And that's not to excuse your choice, but if as your parent, I have to act like the parent, and I can't say you made me act like that. I chose to react that way, and it was the wrong way to react. And so next time, either I'm going to remove myself from the situation, so please don't follow me, just give me a chance. But in the interim, I need to apologize to you. And she goes, well, no, Mom, I know I was, because she's got a really sharp tongue and she's heavy duty. And I said, no, your behavior is for you to own. And I agree with you. I don't think it was your best choice, but I still have to apologize, because the other thing I can do is show you that when I'm not in my best self, that I have to take ownership of that. And so, you're just like, my kid was like the knucklehead, but still it's like, own it, because that's probably more important than being right. I'm probably teaching her something more important than I'm right, you're wrong. That's bad behavior. And so listen, Paul, I have been truly tenderized by the process of being a wife and being a mother. However, in that deconstruction is so much power. And that's the other thing I would say, is that if a woman is able to maintain her individuality, that has been the thing I have fought for through this whole thing. Because I know, for me, selfishly, I will not be a happy person if I still don't see a semblance of just me as a person, that I can go out and like kick ass here and there, or have some self-expression, because I love being Laird's wife and I love being my children's mother. But I have found it essential to fortify my own identity as a person.
Yes, Angie has been through that as well. She, when she's a very good presenter and a very loved teacher and a nutritionist and a Czech professional who run a very successful business before we got together. And so when she got pregnant and she got to where she couldn't work, and then, for the first probably 8 months that Mana was here, she really felt distance from everything that she knew herself to be. And there was definitely a period of adaptation. And I remember when she started going back to work again, how it was just like all of a sudden the lights were on and she was smiling, and her posture was more upright. And she would express to me how great it feels to be able to be herself in that way again. And I think, part of the reason I'm talking to you about this is because a lot of women get stuck because they don't let go of their individuality. So it creates tremendous challenges in parenting and challenges in marriage, in a married life. Mm-hmm. And then there's the women that get depressed because they somehow believe that that's the end of anything they're ever going to have for themselves as being themselves or expressing themselves. And I think it's important for women to hear and everybody to hear from you that there is a juggling act, but if one is conscious about being aware of figuring out ways to meet the needs of self or individuality while leaving the gates open for, keep being porous to the importance of letting go of individuality and staying open to growing.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you try to become a parent and or a spouse while being an individual. And as the old saying goes, there is no I in we. So if you carry too much I into we, well, you get what we have today, which is the average marriage worldwide only lasts 2.5 years.
Yeah.
And when you look at research on attachment syndromes, which is the syndromes we develop if we're not nurtured by our parents effectively, the research shows that it takes about 1.5 years for the average person's attachment syndrome to come out of Pandora's box, because they spend the first year and a half masquerading or saying and doing the things they think they have to do to maintain the connection. But once there's that sense of, okay, we're together now, the veil comes off, and then you start really meeting the software inside that individual. And as I say to a lot of my students, be careful. There's good sex, but then there's 23 hours more a day you have to live with somebody. And if you base your relationship on the first hour of sex, you could be terribly deceived when you have to deal with the rest of the day and they with you. So go a little slower.
Yeah. I think chemistry is important. And I think, listen, let's be totally honest. Like Laird is an incredible husband and father. However, his ability to mesh from his individual self into this sort of pot is not as that. There's more resistance there. Like he'll do it for a while, and then you can see him. And I'm like, oh, this bugger's dadded and husband out, you know. And so I think also, I can't remember the quote. Somebody said, of course, you know, women are more interesting; they suffer more. For anyone to think that it's easy in the sense of, let's just talk about nursing a child. If somebody has the ability and the opportunity to stay home and nurse a child, you never get that time back. But it is you have turned over yourself in a very clear way. And I think that's so important for new parents. It is a finite period of time. So when you're in that battle, in a way, don't bother, because that's what you're doing. And then it will end and it will move on. You will move on to this next phase. And so I think one thing that did always help me was I was always really clear, like, this isn't going to be forever. And this is the time for it to be like this. And, you know, it's an interesting thing, because then you don't look back and think, God, I'm so bummed that I spent that time with my newborn. And listen, there's women who don't have that luxury. So let's not even go there. When you talk about first needs, you were talking about, like with your son, shelter, food, safety, electricity. And in this day and age, in a way, being able to be with your baby is sort of this luxury, right? It's hard in a different way, but it's also this other opportunity. So I just want to say that for us to think also that the dad or the husband or the boyfriend or whatever is supposed to have the same exact experience as the woman, I just don't think it's biologically realistic.
No, I agree with you. And I also, even now, still suffer from exactly what you described as Laird. I mean, my son is a ball of fire. I have to look at myself, and his mother is a powerful, powerful woman. And he is the fire and the water of both of us. And I can stay with him for about a half a day before I feel I need a rescue. But I'll tell you what, it sure makes me appreciate why mommy's a little tired and grumpy if I get home too late sometimes.
Yeah.
And
but these aren't surprises. I guess what I'm saying is, like, I feel like it's okay to identify all this so we don't feel surprised or it's taboo or it's some mystery, like what the hell's wrong with us? It's like, no, this is all like really natural stuff.
Yes. And it also really gets down to some cultural differences. Have you ever read the book Sex at Dawn?
Yeah.
So, you know, when you, and I've of course studied tribal relationships and tribal cultures all over the world, but you know, when you look at the cultures that weren't monogamous, then the whole tribe raised the child. And there's a saying, it takes a tribe to raise a child. And I can tell you there's a real deep level of truth in that. But in our monogamy-based culture, the Western especially, or any monogamous type cultures, you don't have that mutual sharing of children and sharing of tasks. So it really places a heck of a lot more burden on both the mother and the father, because we tend to have our American culture is, as you know, very egocentric. So we have this competition within ourselves between being who I want to be and then the responsibility of being a parent, and how far into that before I lose myself. But in the tribal cultures, that was not nearly the same. And in the tribal cultures, the individual ego wasn't nearly as inflated.
Right.
So we're in a very interesting generation. And then you've got all the predatory marketing and consumerism and people medicating themselves by spending money on credit cards that they don't really have to spend, and constantly being sold hook, line, and sinker on all sorts of junk. So what happens is I see so many people are just working themselves to death to try to maintain some sort of illusion of status, or paying off, medicating themselves with cars and jewelry and fashion statements. So they're working themselves constantly. And by the time it comes time to come home to parent, there's just nothing left of them. So it's a very interesting generation of children. I really am watching to see how are we going to grapple with the kids that are raised without the nurture and the connection that they need to feel safe, or to have what in psychotherapy is called a secure attachment, which only 25% of children in the world today have, based on very large studies. And it's clear that there's plenty of challenges for those that have avoidant attachment, ambivalent attachment, and disorganized attachment, which are the three main challenging attachment styles that emerge and ripple into all areas of people's lives. So I think we're all part of a big human experiment. I can tell you that. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you about some of these things, because I respect you as a person, as a mother, as a wife. And I know you're married to a very, very powerful man who has to have a fairly high level of confidence in himself and individuality to do what he does. And I've also spent enough time working with you that I know you have a very clear and strong presence. You're not a pushover for anybody. So I was just curious how two powerful people like that navigated these caves that we often fear to enter.
Well, we always say sometimes you're the farmer, sometimes you're the flower. And I think, and even though when I go to be the flower, it's not that Laird's not being the farmer as much, like he'll watch the girls and do that, but it's sort of like, how about this? I'm going to support you in going and being the flower. Where when Laird's turn to be the flower, I sort of have a tendency to be closer and nearby. Penny probably understands this very well, in being a farmer. So it's not about like, well, it's my turn, your turn, my turn, your turn. It's like, hey, will you do this for me the way that you do it? And I will do it for you the way that I do it. And so we have a bit of that. And I will say that, we say, you leave your sword at the door. Like what is really interesting for me in the dynamic I have with Laird is, I always say Laird is a person, he's so complimentary and loving and kind. Sometimes he's moody because he's a trapped animal. I get it. He needs the ocean and he needs to go. And so I've learned never to take that personal. And what he has taught me too is never to placate him when he's in that state, because he already resents the fact that he's in the state himself. And so when he sees me placating, he resents it more. And it becomes it's sort of a worse cycle where if I just kind of acknowledge, like I get that he's there, I don't try to aggravate him, but I don't also walk around on eggshells. It is better for the situation altogether. We've also learned that when he's in that conflicted internal state, and I have my own version of it, it's just more quiet. It doesn't become him against the world. It's like I'm allowed to go inside that space. He's just in that place. So it's understanding when you're with a person that's a certain way, and there are these traits that you love about them. They're curious. They have high energy. They have all these things. Well, if you follow the line, it is connected to exactly something that is challenging, not only for you, but actually for them, and that they're probably doing the best that they can. But I don't antagonize Laird. I don't go out of my way. I've said this many times. I don't treat anyone better than I treat Laird. And it's not viewed as a weakness in our house. I think because both of us have a very, him more obvious, me less, kind of, there's just natural checks and balance without there being checks and balance. And so it kind of forces the whole household to function on the up.
Yeah, that's great.
And so it's not like fear, like I'm not afraid of Laird, but I have a reverence for Laird. And I know Laird ultimately at the end, if I doled out enough crap or I didn't treat him well or I was a nag, he isn't actually going to put up with that. And I think Laird knows that I will bend over backwards and do anything for him. And I'm here to elevate his mission too. But at the end, if it wasn't working in a way that was going to also be positive for me, I would leave. Just because I'm not, it's like, I think both of us are like, hey, I want to be my best in a situation and I want to be in a relationship that is dynamic and I'll participate in that. But if it's just, if it was like week after week, year after year of just unsupportive, negative, patronizing, neither one of us would stick around. So we don't feel obliged, which is good and bad. It's a harsh kind of way, but because of that, it's like, it's sort of unspoken, like, hey, bring your best. And by the way, if you're having a shitty day, that's okay too.
Yeah, it takes a long time to learn that. I've been very fortunate. Penny and I have been married for 22 years, and she's really my Buddha. She's given me so much freedom and so much love to truly be myself and to support me, and she's taught me so much. And Angie and I have been together 7 years now, so we're still learning a lot. And having Penny there as a balancing rod has been a great gift for both of us, and for parenting Mana, because Penny had no desire to have children. Mm-hmm. And so when Angie and I and Penny made the agreement to live together and be a family, she said very clearly, just make sure she doesn't get pregnant because I really don't want kids. I don't know if I can handle that. So lo and behold, when Angie got pregnant, I thought, oh my God, I am about to face a very, very painful loss. But she said, I'll do my best and I'll hang in as long as I can. And lo and behold, her and Mana love each other. And even though she really shares in the mothering responsibility, she really loves him and he really loves her. And I've gotten to see a part of Penny that I didn't even know existed. So it's all I'm saying is that there's a real growth process. And even though I said there is no I and we earlier, I will also amend that and say, keep your I in your back pocket, because you do need to maintain a sense of clarity of, what are your ultimate boundaries? When I'm doing relationship coaching with people, I often say, what are the things that you must have to feel comfortable in the relationship? And what are the things that you must not have? Yeah. Because if you don't get clear on those, then you're never going to be able to define whether the relationship is salvageable, workable, where you can find the grace to sacrifice something, knowing that they're going to sacrifice something for you so that the scale stays balanced. Because if the scale doesn't stay balanced, then you get into codependent relationships, you get into addictions as coping tools, you get into a lot of parental battles that really set the children up to believe that's what life's all about. And then they emulate you and you have to look at yourself for the rest of your life. And that might be more pain than the relationship was in the beginning.
Right. It's true. Well, I think it's interesting too, when I've had my own sort of epiphanies throughout this relationship, where a couple of years ago, I sort of feel like, oh, I have a mission. I'm here trying to do stuff. But then it hit me. I was like, and again, I'll use Penny as a reference. I was like, oh, but you know what? Part of what you're doing here too is helping Laird. And when it wasn't a thing that was threatening to me, but it was actually something of, you've been also put here, whether it's forever and ever, right? I wake up each day going, I will do my very best today with him. I will be as kind as I can, as loving as I can today. I don't go like, well, we've got this in the bag and whatever. But also not being threatened or feeling angry that part of what my mission, at least in this day, is to support his mission. Because if he has a very clear path and he's going to express himself a certain way, and maybe that positively, it puts something, he can put something positive out in the world, I want to support that.
Yeah. That's important. And that's really what a relationship's about at the end of the day. I believe all of us have a genius inside of us, and a good relationship fosters the genius instead of suppressing the genius. And I know Penny's really the mother of the entire Chek Institute, and she's grown me in so many ways. And out of love, and her and I from the very beginning, my first marriage was 17 years. And so when Penny and I made our marriage vows, I said, let's only stay together if we honestly wake up in the morning committed to being with each other. But when we can't do that anymore, let's not drag each other through the drudges and nastiness just because we think God's going to burn us in hell for some Christian idea of till death do you part. And so we've always, even though we've had our challenges, we've always woken up, been able to hug and kiss each other and hold hands and solve our problems. And I really think that one of the challenges in our world is there's just not good parenting education. There's not good relationship education. I mean, there are now much more of that available. There is more available due to the information age and access to information. But the side effect of that is there's so much lousy information, it's hard to find the good stuff. And that's one of the paradoxes of the information age, is you're just inundated with everything from just total crap to great stuff. But the total crap is piled so high, it takes somebody, this is what I do for people. As you know, they say, I got this problem. What should I do? Well, I spend so much of my life looking into all this stuff that I say, well, here's a very good course on that for you. So I have a lot of empathy for people, both in relationships, in marriages, and in parenting, because we lost our tribal system a long time ago. The wise elders of the tribe used to educate the children, and they were the most mature, the most empathetic. They weren't in a rush, and they knew what was meaningful in life. But now we've got parents that are so busy, their children are being raised by televisions, Game Boy, and iPhones, and it's just it's a confusing time for people out there.
Well, it is, and I think there's just so much distraction. It's just really, because you know what? Listen, do you think every second I come home with just, I'm so interesting and Laird wants to hear every word out of my mouth, okay, no, and I've heard that story and here's, and the problem is now also we have all these distractions. So people are having to work harder at something that's already challenging to do, which is to be connected, which is to admire each other, which is to be compassionate, which is to listen, which is to not be afraid to say how you really feel, all these things. And then let's add, now we've got emails, now we've got social media, now we've got this, now we've got that. So we have all these other things that are kind of sexy and easy to put in the place of already something that, even though it's gratifying and it has so much depth to it, it does take patience. It isn't fast moving. At times it's not really sexy, and so it's sort of like you have to almost force the environment going, okay, I'm going to put this other stuff away, and I'm going to put my big girl or big boy pants on, and I'm going to listen. I'm really going to listen. And if I've got these feelings that keep coming up, I'm going to have the courage to say, can I just talk to you about some stuff or whatever that is. But it's you have to almost participate much more actively to make it happen.
Yes, you do, for sure. I read about your feelings and correct me if I'm wrong, but what I was reading, someone was interviewing you about your feelings about women today, and you were talking about that you feel it's okay for women to be more submissive. And I know a lot of people probably thought that was a shock coming from you, but in my view, you're a beautiful, powerful woman, and I'm confident in assuming that both your beautiful presence and your power has been a double-edged sword at times in your life. So I'm wondering if you can share your experiences with men, and I'm talking about the kind of women that seem to be very challenging to women today and end up, with all sorts of headlines in the news about, sexual abuse or verbal abuse or whatever. I'm just wondering, how have you navigated these types of experiences? Because being as beautiful as you are and as powerful as you are is certainly going to, I imagine that both men and women can get triggered by you for those reasons. And it's such a big issue today with all this, men are sexist or whatever. It seems like there's almost like a revival of the women's lib movement happening out there, which I find very interesting. And I think I told you when I was contacting you about this interview that I really wanted to get your opinion on that because of the fact that you're a beautiful, powerful woman. So I'm curious, what are your feelings about all this stuff, and what wisdom do you have for women, period, on these issues?
Well, I think, I've had lots of time to think about this, right? And I think we've made this. Okay, so let's go back for a second. So if women are doing an equal job and not getting paid as much, let's say before 50s, 60s, because, men should get paid more because they have to bring the income home to a family. So there was things that were unfair, right? Not cool. Then so you have to identify that and acknowledge that. However, the problem is now, I feel, is that we've taken something and made them gender issues instead of, it's simply bad behavior. So if a male in this situation, for example, is sexually aggressing a woman in the workplace or doing something that's inappropriate that she hasn't consented to, this is bad behavior. And what's happened is we're villainizing an entire group, which is men, instead of saying, hey, listen, this behavior is unacceptable and we're not going to deal with it. Because what's happening then, now men are afraid. They don't know what they're allowed to say or not say. Good men, good people. Mm-hmm. And also it's going to be interesting to see, because nobody still, maybe Jordan Peterson and a couple others, but nobody's really discussing still the biology. And
yes, yeah.
And so my problem for me is, like, as a strong female or whatever in this world's definition, I was always attracted to alpha males. And so Laird is an alpha male. Now, what does that mean? That just simply means that Laird, if I said to him, hey, can the agreement be that you're going to stay home and watch the children? And what he'd say, I don't know if that's for me. We would have understood this early in our relationship. Now, having said that, there's dynamics where some women are like, hey, I have this incredible job. The value of my time right now is getting paid double X to your X. Would you be comfortable staying home with the children? And some men might be like, that would be an awesome opportunity, and I want to do that, right? And so I think first and foremost, it's not about asking all men or all women to be exactly the same. It's about being honest about your truth and how you feel that you can contribute and how you can do it. So you got to start there. You can't say, well, it should be equal, because first of all, especially when you start adding children and stuff, it's very difficult to cut the pie up equally as far as responsibility. Yeah. I think it's a misnomer. So my thing was, I wanted to go out in the world. I wanted to, I want to try to kick ass and let's do stuff. And I want to accomplish and I want to do all strive and all this stuff. But I realized when I came home, I desired to be with a male who could build stuff, fix stuff, protect me, and sort of had this primal thing that I knew I didn't have it. And so I was drawn to Laird for some of these things that would be called an alpha male. So I sort of just got really in tune with whatever that language was. And that if I came at Laird and was like raw and aggressive, that really wasn't working so well. So if I started to, and then we started having a family, if I brought my softness into the home, that nurturing side, that femininity, and yes, a level of yielding, which submissive means to yield. You serve your family oftentimes. It doesn't mean just the woman. The male serves it in his way as well. It brought out this side of him that was, again, so much more positive for me, but I was lifting him up and supporting him, and he was nurturing me and cherishing me and protecting me and our children. And that's, at least in my experience, what I was looking for. Now, having said all of that, behind it, I always compare it to Mother Nature. It's sunny, beautiful. Can you generate the most heaviness, lightning and thunder and earthquakes and tornadoes and floods? You certainly can. Do I think that I have, behind my nurturing and my yielding and all of these things, the power to zap Laird? I do. I just don't know what the need for it is when that's not how we're operating.
Yes, I think too, though, and I very much appreciate everything you're sharing, and I totally agree with that. And, I'm the alpha male type, as I think you'd probably recognize.
Yes.
And so I think, it's kind of almost like, I think it goes back to our previous discussion about the fact that there's not a lot of people that have become adults yet. So I think, in my observation, a lot of this constant bickering and squabbling and finger pointing it sounds like you're in a teenage, in a junior high school, and guys are pinching butts and girls are slapping faces. And it's like, sometimes I see this stuff. I mean, I don't watch television much, but people tell me about stuff, or Penny will send me an ad and say, or not an ad, but, a video clip of so-and-so getting in trouble for doing such and such, and let me know this is an issue that maybe we want to explore to help bring some clarity to. And I look at it, I'm like, this is just like a bunch of children in adult bodies that, they can't manage penises, vaginas, money, drugs, sex, phones.
You're talking about the media loving to keep the message going, right? The message of hate and division and all of these things. And to your point, though, is we don't have a lot of education, because if you really want to talk about alpha male, that means that their ability to respect, honor, covet, cherish a strong woman, that capacity is far greater in quote unquote real men.
Well, it is not only greater, but if you study nature, an alpha male has multiple women. That's what makes him the alpha. If you look at chimpanzees or gorillas or bonobos or almost any of the mammals out there, the alpha male is the one who's got the genetics and the strength to back it, and Mother Nature sets the alpha male up so that his genes have a higher likelihood of being reproduced to support the species. So, one of the challenges with alpha males is that they often have a hard time keeping commitments to one woman, and I've counseled countless professional athletes having major problems in their life, not because they're an alpha male, but because they're telling their wife that they're in a monogamous relation and pretending to be in one, but they've got 5 or 6 other girls with credit cards. And I've even had professional athletes that are carrying like 4 different phones. Each one of them's for one of their secret, lovers.
Yeah.
And so,
but see, Paul, like when you talk about that, right? That isn't about, I always said to boys, because I know plenty of professional athletes, I'm like, just don't get married. Just because here's the deal. That behavior, it's not that it's good or bad. It's not honest.
That's the key thing that I have to keep working with them on. They think because I have 2 wives, or because I have, more open views on sexuality, and the word goes through the grapevine, that they're going to come to me and I'm going to teach them how to be better at cheating. And boy, are they ever surprised when I tell them, at the end of the day, the reason your adrenals are burnt out is because you're carrying the burden of lying to so many people.
Yes.
And that's heartbreaking. And I don't care who you are or what culture you come from. At the fabric of us is morality, which means the ability to sustain life and to support life. And in no tribal culture at any time in history was it safe to lie to each other, because it meant you increase the risk of dying.
Yes.
And I think that we've got this culture that's so damn confused, and there's, part of it, and this leads to my next question, is we have a largely Christian-based culture. So you get people being raised, programmed into monogamy, but it goes completely against their biological instincts in most cases. So the statistics on cheating are shockingly high. And in fact, the ones that cheat the most are married women with kids, which blew my mind when I saw the research.
But you know why? They're looking for some excitement.
Yes.
So they're not cheating to cheat. They're maybe potentially getting ignored by their partner, but it's also like, can I just get a moment, like a break, to feel something, to be just this person, instead of maybe channeling that into the relationship that they're in and or putting it into their life.
Absolutely. I agree. And that's why when I left my first marriage, I promised myself I would never get married under the agreement of monogamy. And my first question for Penny when it was getting to be quite intense and it seemed like we were heading for a long-term commitment, I explained to her what happened in my first marriage and how it's just unnatural for me to be monogamous, but how important it was for me to never, ever have to lie to her. I never lied to my first wife. I never lied to my mother.
Yep.
And I would rather die than play that game. It's just not in my genome. I can't be a good therapist for people if I live on a stack of lies.
Well, but this is more the point. This is more the point of everything in life. If you're not hurting yourself and you're not hurting others, if you're telling the truth, if you're creating space for live and let live, it's like, these are the issues, not, he has two wives and they have one. It's like, this is everybody's own choice. If you're telling the truth, then other people get to make their choices. And if they feel good about it, they can say, you know what, Paul, no problem for me. Or other person might go, you know what, Paul, I really love you and I've loved dating you, but I think I wouldn't be comfortable with that. But it's all there.
It is all there. And it's really just about being honest about what you need so that you can attract someone that's in harmony with that.
Yeah.
And
Laird said he couldn't do more than one wife.
Well, Penny told me in the beginning, she says, I don't care if you have 7 wives as long as they all cook, clean, contribute to the bottom line, and do not talk too much. So she set that criteria. And, I found that the not talking too much is very, very hard when you get too many women in your life, because they're just more expressive verbally than men are. But, and I had experiences where I was having, I was intimate with sometimes as many as 4+ women at a time. But I found that, the more intimate you get with someone, the more text messages and the more phone calls and the more part of their life you become. And then I found myself being called to be the therapist for all these people and lend money for everybody that's got no money. And I felt like I was just being torn to pieces. And I'm like, I can't handle this.
Was it for connection that you were seeing all these women, or was it sexual?
I think for me, it was, I'm a physical person, and my mother was a physical lover. She always held me. She used to, I remember one time when I was a little boy, she showed my bottom off to her friends and said, look at his cute little bottom. Isn't it gorgeous? And so I learned to feel physical affection as a form of love from my mother. So it became inherently a way for me to express my love. And in my profession and traveling the world and, being a respected speaker and leader and pioneer, that's attractive to a lot of women. I found myself coming across women and meeting them and sometimes working with them as my students who then I developed friendships with, but found that there were people that I just felt a deep connection to. I felt harmony with. And so this is why I was always honest with Penny. I said, I really enjoy this person's company. I'd like to spend some time with them. And so it was almost like they carried some medicine that I needed, and I carried some medicine that they needed, but I never wanted it to be complicated. And my rule is first, do no harm. I always made it a promise to myself, I don't engage sexually if I have any concept that doing so is going to be harmful, such as if they're married and they're doing it behind the door, then for me, the answer is no, I can't go that way because I'm not interested in participating in that kind of living. Sex is not that important to me. So for me, it was really just about being honest with what came out of me naturally, as opposed to having to conform to social ideals.
And I think a lot of men would probably feel that way. You know what I mean? Like I think a lot of men would be interested to know how you could even accomplish that. But I don't know. And also listen, Paul, let's call it. I mean, if you're a teacher and, AKA guru, sometimes too, that dynamic is very heavy between the student and the teacher, right? Like there's this they become in awe of you, then, I think that's part of why I think, for example, like for female to realize, like if you I try to uplift Laird and I recognize great things in Laird. And so I let him know that I recognize that, because I think men, as strong as they are, they need that.
I agree. I think women do too.
They need differently. They need, not all. I mean, I certainly understand that Laird has stayed with me because of that he respects me, not because of our sex life. But that when Laird looks at me and he's like, you look great, or I feel that he desires me, and that I also understand that he will. I've been in situations where I feel that he'll step in and protect me. And that deep and behind it all, he genuinely respects me for hopefully some version of my intelligence and the way that I'm trying to conduct myself. But for him, I also know it's really important for him to feel lifted up, to be like, wow, you're amazing. Like, you have special attributes and you're very strong. Men need this. And so sometimes they go outside just to get that. It's not even
absolutely.
Sex. It's like, this chick isn't giving me a hard time. But also I'll flip it and say, if you can conduct yourself in your home that way, then that's so powerful. If Laird can come home and bring his best self, and then I have the opportunity to say, God, you are so amazing and so resourceful, then he can come back and bring his best self. And I can reinforce that with, wow, I so appreciate you. And I feel really fortunate to be on this journey with you. Then you're in that other cycle, right? So there's so many shades to it all. Like why somebody would want to go outside the house, or if it's just a connection, if it's like, man, that person is giving me something that no one is giving me, whatever that is. But it still comes down to the truth.
Well, yes. And if we don't look for the truth, then we usually end up going through a grinding mill, and we may or may not find it if we deceive ourselves too much. And
that's right.
I think, Gabby, since we're talking about this, the thing that I learned after 17 years in a monogamous relationship is that it was very important for me to be brutally honest with myself about who I am and not be somebody else, or it was going to cause trouble. And I think that I made sure that Penny was in a position to do that. And we agreed that we each take responsibility for deciding if we need to go outside the relationship or have friendships, that we carry the responsibility for that. And we also carry the responsibility to decide if we're compatible or not compatible. And if we have a challenge, that we have to voice that together and work through that. Or we don't really have a relationship. We're just in some sort of a pathological codependency, which just leads to pain and separation, and usually a lot of ugliness in the process. And I just feel if people would just be honest with themselves and share that same thing with others, then they would attract the right partners to themselves to do the work, to grow deeper into love. And then life takes on a lot more meaning, because the bumps of life are a lot harder to take when you're afraid of yourself, because you can't even trust yourself anymore.
Well, I think, Paul, listen, if you talk to me, like you said, hey, if you had a message before you were married or had children, how about the message period, which is, can you really figure out and be honest with who you are, and then be around people that will allow that? Because that is so scary, especially if it's at all different than what the world is telling you you're supposed to be and feel. Now, the thing I'm really curious about is how you didn't, like, let's say for Penny, and I don't mean to speak out of school and talk Penny's business, but let's say Penny met other people as well. I'm fascinated how she never got drawn out of the situation with you into a situation with someone else.
Well, I've asked her that. And first of all, we agreed. I always said to her, you don't have to tell me anything you're not comfortable with. I just want you to be happy. So I never put any pressure on her. But when I have talked to her about it, she basically says, you're all I need. You're a full meal deal. You're enough that I can't handle anymore.
Yeah.
And so that was how, basically what she said to me. I've tried to get her to let me do an interview with her on this, and Angie, but Penny doesn't really feel, she says, I'm way too busy for that, and people can figure it out for themselves. I don't want to be there. She doesn't like to be an open book like that.
No, and that's what I mean. I just do find it fascinating that, like, sometimes even just the newness of another situation could almost be, I call it they call it the 80-20, where let's say maybe you had this agreement with your partner and somehow you met somebody that had the 20% that your partner didn't have, and that kind of temporarily blindsided you long enough to, like, maybe almost blow up one relationship to go into the other, and then be like, oh shit, what did I do? And I'm just fascinated that in all these years, because, I mean, it happens in newness and all these other dynamics, and sometimes just something new. Like when you work with somebody and you have all the details of life, there is nothing more unsexy in a way. But then if you can sort of compartmentalize that, and then the relationship is growing and it has a richness that other relationships can't have. But I'm just amazed that she's able to kind of weather those elements, and still she's right there. That's pretty far out.
I did tell you she's a Buddha.
Far out.
And before I got into this relationship with Penny, my first wife was playing the field a little bit, and I found out about it, and it was very hard for me. And so it was so deep of an experience for me that when I was single for the time period between my first marriage and meeting Penny, which I think was a couple of years, 2.5 years or something like that, one of the things I did was I realized I had to explore that part of myself. And an interesting thing happened. I always felt short on sex in my first relationship. So I said to Great Spirit, I need more sex with women. And I left the relationship feeling a sense of relief, because finally I was free, but I could not get an erection for the first year. And it was like God was playing a dirty joke on me, because beautiful women were coming out of the woodwork wanting to have sex with me. And I'm like, oh my God, how am I going to deal with this? This is embarrassing. And of course I would tell them, look, I just went through a divorce and a part of me is still broken inside. And so what I did is I had a very good looking friend who is a great athlete and just a great guy. And so I would offer these girls, would you like to make love to me and a friend of mine? And several of them said, oh my God, I'd like to meet him and go from there. And next thing you know, I was having these neat experiences where I was sharing women. And I found that, and I even shared with my first wife before we got split up. And I found that I had to be brave enough to give to my partner what I was asking for myself, or I was a hypocrite. So I started that training for myself with my first wife before we got divorced. And then I continued it. And I really just kept telling myself, if you really believe in love, then you need to be brave enough to share love and not treat people as an object that you can possess. And it definitely rototills all your programming. And it really is a spiritual growth process. But it's exactly what I see most men avoiding. And inherent in the men is that they want to be able to have sex with as many women as possible, and they want their wife to stay completely committed to them, which to me is copping out on mutual respect.
Well, exactly. And you know, you might find for me personally, at least where I am right now in my life, I would just prefer to be with Laird and you know, and I always joke, I'm like, hey, if I'm going to do, like, there's a part of me that's like, I will do everything for Laird. And maybe at this point I don't really, and you know, we have the kids and all this. It's like, I don't know. We came into it with the feeling of, hey, it's going to be us. But the great thing I know about Laird is if anything ever changes for him, he has the decency as a person, not a man, not a woman, as a person, to be honest with me. And so I think that, you know, we tell little kids, if you just tell the truth, it's going to be okay. And it's so scary. But yet we as adults, we have a hard time with that ourselves. And
yes,
I think it becomes so powerful when also you can be your full self, your truthful self, and people can look at you and say, I love you. And that works for me, or, hey, I love you, but I'm going to, you know, kind of have to tuck to the side on that one, or whatever it is. But also, Paul, we live at a time where if we really expose ourselves, there's so many opportunities for everybody to chime in now, right? Like, yeah, so many people, because normally it would be like, okay, I'm going to expose myself, and then people within my inner circle, if a tribe, whatever, 150, 200 people. Okay. But we live now in this world where, and actually people, they react. They don't actually think about it, right? So if they heard like, oh, you go, well, I have 2 wives. They'd be like, oh, you have 2 wives and that. It's like, well, no, wait a second. You know, like, everyone involved understands what's happening, and we live a clean and honest life. You know, there isn't that discussion or that sort of tolerance for everybody's truth.
No, yeah, and that's part of our growth as human beings, I think. And you know, it's sometimes you just have to look at the obvious. I mean, I remember when I first read the Kinsey report and saw the statistics, it was like the number of people that are just living lies. It's got to be painful, and to be in bed with someone that you say you love, but knowing that there is a veil between you, and knowing that it's the kind of veil that if it gets pierced, it means the end of a relationship. It can mean destruction to children and a sense of abandonment and just tremendous pain. I think as a youth, I was wise enough to figure out that telling the truth and the pain that comes with it is better than the pain that comes with telling lies.
Yeah. And it's just, and in a way, if you look in nature, animals probably don't lie.
Well, I don't even think they have a concept for it.
Right. And so I think sometimes what's so great about us can also get us further from parts of our natural being, that if we have, and listen, it's hard. I fight each day, you know, like even when we're talking about our identity, and I'm navigating, trying to navigate myself towards my individuality and away from my identity, like to have the courage just to keep moving that way. And it's an everyday task that, you know, even sometimes when we look at our inner thoughts, I'm like, whoa, you got a lot of work to do.
Well, yeah, I could say a lot on that, but I don't want to.
No, I know.
We could have another conversation about that. Well, Gabrielle, I've really enjoyed our conversation so far. I really think we're touching on the real issues that a lot of people just like to sweep under the rug, pretend aren't there, hide, and you know, it ends up being in the tabloids and in the news. And so thank you very much for sharing so deeply with me and so honestly. As I was doing some research, I happened to notice that you went to a Catholic school. Is that correct?
Yeah, my junior and senior year, I went to a Christian school, and it actually changed my life, though.
I was interested, how did that influence your mindset regarding issues such as religion, and how did that shape what you think God is or isn't? And what would you describe your spiritual philosophy to be today?
You know, I was not raised in a formal religious environment. And then I was put in this school, and it was incredibly structured around the Christian faith. And I'll take it a step further, my senior year, the principal and his wife with two very young children were kind enough. Actually, I ended up having to live with them for a couple of months.
Wow.
So I was led into the school as the only, quote, unsaved person in the high school.
That's cute.
Because, you know, you have to confess with your mouth that, you know. Here's what it did for me. It opened up my mind to something greater than myself, not necessarily because I was already a bit older at 15. It wasn't for rigidness and for rules. It opened up my mind to love, and to also even to the notion of kind of dark and light, or good and evil, if you will. You know, just sort of brought awareness to like, that maybe, let's say, for example, if you're trying to strive to stay in the light more, that you might have to also not defend yourself, but be aware, stay awake, that there's always a lot of things in play. So not just it's all good or it's all bad, but that, you know, even this idea of like, well, where's the chink in your armor? Is it greed? Is it lust? Is it like, where's your chink? That it could be one of the things that pull you down, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so it just sort of opened up this dialogue. And the other thing it did for me, I met some people that I really saw them trying to live a godlike life, meaning compassionate, tolerant, more loving, giving, service, the right things about maybe what parts of religion could be. Yeah. And I got to meet a lot of really high quality people that it gave me the hope and faith that there are other people out there doing their very best. They're not perfect, but they're really giving it a try. And so that's sort of what it did for me. You know, all the very strict rules and like, okay, your skirt has to be this long and not premarital sex and all those things. None of that really impacted me. I mean, I was coming from the Caribbean.
Yeah.
But it just opened my heart up to things much bigger than myself.
I think that's what religion's really supposed to do.
Yeah, and listen, the Bible is a fascinating book full of tales of important lessons for all humans, you know, and like I said, that being at that place changed the trajectory of my future.
I think that's absolutely beautiful, and it's lovely to hear that exposure. And interestingly, too, one of the definitions of Catholic is holistic. And I've never met a Catholic yet that knew that, interestingly. And one of my favorite saints is Saint Hildegard of Bingen. And she was just a mind-blowing I mean, it's just too much to even describe. If you study Hildegard of Bingen, she had just amazing teachings on diet. She was a great composer, a great artist. She was so open and honest. And she actually was probably one of the first women to stand up for women's rights. And she actually told the higher ups in the monastery that she was in that they were being abusive to females, and she simply left and took all the nuns with her and started her own order. And ultimately they begged her to come back because she grew to be so popular and powerful that her whole movement became bigger than theirs. But, you know, I think the mind comes with polarity. All human minds are polarized because consciousness cannot arise without polarity. You can't know up without down, good without bad, and all virtues are in complementary opposition with vices. So there's righteousness, but then there's righteousness that's offensive. There's being good, but then there's being good to the point that you're not living anymore, and now you're dying of some ideal. But I think that part of growing up is learning how to find the balance in you know, honesty, morality, and recognizing that we're all expressions of each other and we're all part of the world, and that getting along together is more important. So I think if religion matures to the point where it's what it intended to be, which is a unifying force and not the source of territorialism or ethnocentric behavior, then it'll come a long way. So I'm really grateful to hear that it had such a positive effect on you.
It did, and I feel like it rooted me into things, like you said. It connected me to the larger world, seen and unseen, than I had been at that time, by that time in my life. And it also, you know, sometimes it just gives you a little internal checklist, like, well, are you being prideful, or are you judging that person, or are you being fearful, or where is this feeling coming from? And especially like in pursuit, you know, like when you're pursuing something, it's like, why are you genuinely pursuing this? And just kind of giving you another form of a North Star, if you will.
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, I've studied world religion extensively for many, many years because so many of my patients' problems I track right back to religious programming and harsh belief systems. But in my library, I have a very amazing book called The Parallel Sayings of Jesus, Buddha, Krishna, and Lao Tzu. And when you sit and read that, you realize they're all saying the same basic things. At the core of all religions is the same message. It's once you get past the core teachings of what the teachers, you know, the real authentic leaders of the religions were saying, whether you attribute it to Jesus or Lao Tzu or Buddha or Krishna or any of the other ones, it's only when people start putting their own spin on it that the trouble starts. And I really feel that if people would just spend the time to study some of the core teachings of the different world religions, we would have a lot more empathy for each other, because we're all dealing with the same challenges, and many of them are the ones we're talking about today.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree with that more. And I think the other thing too, though, is like if you say to me, hey, why do you train and try to eat better and all these things? It's actually so I can attempt to get into a state of mind that gives me a chance to not only gain some perspective and maybe acceptance of myself, and maybe enough self-love that then I can also then try to practice that with the people around me. Again, that's flawed. My practice is flawed, but I do find that it gives me more of a fighting chance to do that. And so sometimes, like when you talked about the rigid religious training, sometimes that creates so much guilt and suppression that it keeps us from that love. And then I think it keeps us with having that ability with others.
Well, I think whenever you start enforcing things that are unnatural, it makes it impossible for people to succumb to them, because it pits themselves against the idea. And what happens is people begin to have so much shame and guilt and doubt in themselves that they get to a place where they can't love themselves. But then you end up in a relationship expecting somebody else to love you, and that never works. That's exactly what Osho meant when he said the beauty of love is that it doesn't work. And people get confused by that. But having spent years studying his teachings, and I have about 800 pages of handwritten notes, I can tell you if you get deeper into his teachings, he extrapolates on that. And what he says is that as long as you're expecting somebody else to love you and you're unwilling to love yourself enough to have love to share with them, love will not work, because it's really a form of dangerous codependency. And so I think it's part of the growth of human beings to work through that. Ooh.
That's Laird tackling Brody. They have a thing called always be ready. And so they surprise each other, and then somebody yells out, always be ready. So that's what you just heard.
That's great. I teach that anyone wanting to heal, grow, or develop themselves into somebody they feel good about can benefit from identifying what I refer to as their dream, goal, or objective as a means of guiding their intention and their efforts, which falls under the heading of Dr. Happiness in my 4-doctor system.
Yep.
How important do you feel that having a dream, goal, or objective is in your life?
That's such a good question. Laird and I talk about sometimes, because, I'm 49 now and Laird's 55. And we were just talking about this, that Laird's one of his favorite expressions is never let your memories be greater than your dreams. And I think for both of us individually, because we still dream, we still have dreams. This isn't the kind of stuff, I'm this age now, so I can't do that. Or you get up and you're not excited. There's something about dreaming and the possibility and the unknown, but the willingness to say, I'm going to go adventure in a sort of directed way into this unknown, which is what the dream is, or the mission, or the goal, that it's a little bit like hope. It's a little bit sort of like, well, what's around the corner? And even the notion still of expanding, learning, growing, improving, being better. I think people don't realize, especially like athletes know this, half of what you love about doing athletics is improving. Each day when you're young and you go to practice or you do something and you're from week to week, you're just a little bit better. This is some pretty magical stuff of life. And I think that a dream or a mission is part of that idea of I can still expand. I can still learn something. I can still connect to something I've never connected to, an idea, a thought, a skill, that really makes life romantic and exciting. And sort of on the days that you don't want to fly out of bed, you kind of go, okay, but I have something that I'm going for.
The definition that I have created, I don't know if it's a collection of tidbits I got because I study so many books. Sometimes they all stream together. But when people ask me, what's your definition of spirituality? I tell them spirituality at its essence is connecting to a greater whole. Mm. And because of exactly what you just said, if we have a dream, goal, or objective, we're engaged in something that's inevitably going to bring us into contact with parts of ourselves that we can grow and into relationships where inevitably we're going to need to grow. I mean, you can't be part of a team without having a growth opportunity. You can't be married without growth opportunities. You can't have kids. You can't work in any job without having to deal with challenges with people or some kind of a process. So for me, having a dream, goal, or objective to guide your life or your week or your day inspires you to grow yourself. And in so doing, we inevitably find that to really do anything meaningful in the world requires the support of other people or Mother Nature. And I've actually had people tell me, I don't need anybody else's help. And I say, really? Who made the toilet paper you're wiping your butt with?
Yeah.
Who made the computer you're carrying around? Who made the shoes you run in? Who made the gym equipment? So once we start looking around, we realize we can't really do anything meaningful in the world without each other. And if you have a dream, goal, or objective, like you said, it keeps you inspired to keep going and making something more out of yourself, which inherently brings you into the realization you need other people and you need to learn how to get along with them and find harmony together. And I found it's a lot easier to find harmony with people that have a common dream, goal, objective, or similar values.
Yeah.
So I was just curious.
Well, and today we get told like, oh, I'll go to school, then maybe some of us go to college, and then we'll get that job, and then it's like we don't realize we have the right and the capacity to continue to ask questions and be curious and redefine parts of who we are, or add or extend what that definition of who we are, not based on our gender, our previous identification, our occupation, our age, but just our spirit. Like, to expand and extend that is something we have the right and the ability to do our whole lives. And if you can be around other people that support that idea, because you do need it, because some days, man, it's like you're tired, you don't have the energy, you know, you're human. But when you surround yourself with people that are doing it on the days you don't have it, but then maybe they're doing it, you look over and you go, oh yeah, that's right. And you can keep going.
Yeah. I think that's also what if you're with the person that you should be with for the right reasons. In other words, you're not bullshitting yourself, or you're not, just hanging on because you're too chicken to be alone or something like that.
Right.
Then inevitably I find there's that natural yin and yang polarity. I know many times in my life, when I turned 50, I went through a ball buster of a midlife crisis, and I won't go into all the details for time's sake, but the point I'm making is that I was like, Penny, maybe we should just sell the Institute, because I just can't keep traveling this much and talking this much and seeing this many clients. I'm practicing everything I teach, and I feel like I'm dying a little bit every day, and I don't want to be a hypocrite. So I have got to stop traveling, or I gotta figure out another way to keep this Institute alive. Do you want to sell this thing? And she said, no, I know it's tough, but this is your dream, and this is helping a lot of people. And I'm in the game. If you can stay in it, I'll stay in it. So she picked me back up. She inspired me. And inevitably, if she's feeling low energy or going through some challenges, I'm the one supporting her. And it's the same even with Angie. We all three have this amazing harmony and ability to support each other. And I think that's the beauty of life. And that's the beauty of having an awareness of the values that you really are harmonized to entering into relationships, so that you don't find yourself in bed with someone that is against vaccines when you're pro-vaccine, or is anti-abortion when you're pro-abortion, or some of these issues that are just deal breakers, or life just gets to be a real tough ride. Yeah,
it's so true. And I think that message, though, of being a person who can hold space and lift up other people, and knowing that you're valuable enough to ask the same of the relationships you're in, be it friendships or romantic relationships, it's key. And the key, though, with that is still that you're willing to do it for anyone that you say, hey, I'm your friend, or I'm meaning even a relationship. That's the way you live. If they don't do it and they can't do it, fine. Through time, you'll say, hey, this isn't working out for me. But that every time you're in one of those relationships, you commit to being a person who will hold space for people, who will nudge them up when they're tired, and be that way. Because I think that is the best way to find that like-minded person who will come and do it automatically for you.
Yes. Well, I think whatever our truest intentions are,
yes,
we become a magnet, and we attract those people to us. If we're really harmonized within ourselves, then we are magnetic to people that have that type of harmony within themselves. And then as we grow in maturity, we're more easily able to recognize who really is and isn't in harmony with us, regardless of the show they're putting on or the words they're saying. We get that deeper sense of wisdom, and then we are more conscious about who we sign deals with, who we have friendships with, who we marry or who we have sex with.
Yeah.
But it's, again, those are the things that we often got to learn from elders. But because our tribal and family systems are so broken, it's a tough road for young people out there today, because they really often have to find this out the hard way. And these are the kinds of things that can really break your spirit if you don't have the kind of support that we're offering right here today.
Well, listen, it's all it starts there in life. It is that self-awareness and sort of getting some self-identity and understanding a little bit, but then it's who you get to share this with and who you get to drudge through the hard times with, and who's you're learning from and who you're teaching, and that exchange. Laird is on such a heavy personal mission still for riding giant waves. And what's interesting is what he eats and who he's around and what he's reading and what he's listening to. And when he goes to bed, it all is to support him, which is also to support that mission, which is also to support his relationships. But I think also for young people, as they're doing that, it's like, in a way, you can go and have fun. And I'm not talking about not seeing silly movies and things like that, but in everything we do, we're inviting whatever that is. And so we think nothing of like, a snarky comment or a little bit of too much drinking on a Friday night. But what we don't realize is that it's all feeding into this bigger kind of energy that we want to support us. And so we've got to participate in that so that we can get that support. And so I think that's another thing is like, well, you can't be like, well, I'm totally honest in work and this and with my friends, but I lie to my lover, or, it's like, it never really works. So I think in your early 20s is like, you're kind of flushing that out. And it's like, you sort of then have to choose. And it's even, like what we spend our time listening to, and, all of this feeds into the amount of support we're actually able to build back for ourselves.
Yes. Today we have the highest rates of anxiety, depression, and suicide in pretty much every category measured. My observation is that most people have forgotten that it's their responsibility to identify what's happy making for them and build that into their daily life. Gabby, what is happy making for you, and how do you make that happen with enough regularity not to feel like life is closing in on you or getting too flat?
Well, flat, I have to fight flat because by nature, weirdly, there's a flatness to me. It's kind of, Laird used to joke that I'm like a sterno flame, on and steady. And let me tell you, that can be pretty flat. So I think for me, and I've accepted this, a sense of peace or calm, not happiness, not ha ha ha.
Right. I'm talking about sustainable happiness.
Yeah, no, I'm saying like, I even know myself well enough to go like peace, and sort of a weird equilibrium feels really good to me. And if also I feel that I am, kind of serving the buckets of my life. So my health, my well-being, my family and friends, my work bucket, and a little bit of the fun bucket. That's the bucket that I need the least, quite frankly. But when I feel like I'm feeding those buckets and they're like in a plentiful, genuine way, and I have fluidity with the people I'm very close to, and I do feel like I'm being productive because that is very important to me. It's maybe something I'm always going to have to work on. I'm pretty good. Like I'm not a big. I like to have sort of dinners with people I'm close to and connect. That this is important to me. But I sort of don't need a ton of action, and all of that. So I'm just aware of the buckets. And I like if my training bucket suffers too long, or if I know I haven't spent that kind of really good, juicy time with my kids, and, you know, or my work is like too way far on the back burner, I do start to feel a little, just frustrated. So for me, I just try to manage it that way.
So what I'm hearing you say is that being aware of your needs, i.e. what are your buckets,
yeah,
and then honoring that and being aware of when one of them's getting low and saying, okay, it's time to, you know, turn the flame up in your analogy and go get that exercise I need, or
yeah,
stop taking life so seriously and go watch something funny, or, you know,
mm-hmm.
enjoy some partying with some friends or whatever. So what it sounds like to me is you are aware of those key areas that are happy making and nourishing for you, and that you're sensitive to when you need to engage each of those key areas.
Yes. And I'm ferocious and selfish about those areas. And I'm also comfortable with knowing I am so striving to figure out, how do I make a big life and continue to keep simplifying?
That's the big one.
I'm trying to grow, you know, our businesses, or some of them right now, they're expanding and growing. And it's like, there's a part of me that's like, I don't want to hold myself back. For so many years, I held myself back because the other side of me was like, too much creates collateral damage. You will never want to sacrifice your personal relationships, your family relationships for more. So I was always really clear about that. But now, like, my kids are getting older, that there's sort of some more room for that other stuff. And now I'm sort of going, I don't want to limit the amount of expansion or success, but within that, how am I simplifying my life? And that is an interesting kind of juggling act. And I think it does get easier as you get older. But you're striving at the same time for some form of expansion of, you know, kind of tolerance and capacity and maybe success, and then simplification. And that's where I'm at.
Yeah, I think, you know, simplicity is the foundation of complexity. And one of the challenges with the information age is that right out of the gate, kids are being pushed into complex situations in school and memorizing a lot of stuff and having to learn how to use so many programs and things that just make my head ache. Thank God Penny's a techno genius. But
yeah,
it is, you know, there's the first simplicity is when we're a child. Then the ego grows into complexity, and it reaches the point, just like I described, where if your life gets so complicated that you can't inflate it all, you can't put enough energy in to keep it going, then you hit a midlife crisis or some kind of a health crisis that levels you. And lo and behold, you end up finding out that going to bed and getting sleep and eating real food and drinking water and having time for some movement and doing some things that keep you happy ultimately boil down to something fairly simple. But
yes,
we go from the simplicity of a child to the complexity of an adult. But then we end up realizing that in order to really feel good for the long run, we have to somehow marry the complexity and the simplicity to keep the foundation in place, and just be careful about when we say yes when our heart is saying no, is what I've found.
Absolutely. And people overextending themselves, and the idea too of expanding. So maybe continuing to learn and express yourself professionally doesn't have to translate to more. So it doesn't mean, now I need to go to more dinners. Now I need to have a bigger house. Now I need to, it's allowing that expansion and keeping and knowing very clearly that it's still going to be the same things that make me feel really good.
Yes. And I think those things really boil down to, well, I call them the four doctors. Yeah. What's happy making for you?
Yes.
How should you be eating to keep your body healthy and vital so you have the energy to repair yourself and feel good and not be imbalanced because of the choices you're making with diet? How much movement do I need to be healthy and accomplish my stated dream goal or objective? And how much rest do I need to stay healthy, whole, and recover from whatever it is that I'm doing every day and get the psychogenic repair that only sleep can give? And without those 4 doctors, I found nobody can be in balance. As you know, I've had thousands and thousands of patients, many of the very best athletes in the world. And it's very rare to meet anyone that has awareness of those 4 factors.
Yeah.
But those really turn out to be the reductio ad absurdum. You cannot take it down. You can't reduce life down below those 4 things: diet, quiet, movement, and happiness. Because if you're not in touch with those 4 things, I tell people, it's like a 4-spoke wheel. If you knock one spoke out, it turns into something that looks more like a triangle, and it takes a lot of energy to roll that wheel. If you take 2 spokes out, it's almost impossible to roll. But we roll through life, and those 4 spokes at minimum have to be intact, or we're going to spend a lot of the money we've earned on doctors and therapies and medical drugs and surgeries and things that ultimately just put people into more fear and more financial stress.
Yeah.
And with the medical system the way it is, unfortunately, a lot of people don't get the benefit of learning from those experiences and being guided to skilled helpers unless they go into the allied healthcare profession and meet an acupuncturist or a craniosacral therapist or a Chek professional that has already made that transition in their own life and knows how to recognize when the etiology of a person's problem is really something simple that's appearing to be complicated.
Right. I think one thing I've been grateful for in my adult life is because I have been partnered next to Laird for half of my for my adult life.
Yeah.
Is he has those 4 down involuntarily. He doesn't really have to work for it. He just, whether it's primally, intuitively, I don't know. He does that. I could have gotten distracted down task road more. But he's been a really good example and someone who's tethered me to those 4 things pretty strongly. So I always feel glad. And this goes back to what we're saying, though. It isn't about being able to get everywhere all the time on your own. It's just making sure that you have the idea of it. And then you're surrounding yourself with people that are like, hey, get to bed,
Right.
So.
Well, what an amazing interview, Gabby. It's been a long time since I had a chance to just talk to you. And I must say, you really are an amazing, wise woman. I'm very blessed to be able to share this interview with the world. And I think that your journey is such a gift to so many people. And I'm looking forward to interviewing Laird too, because we all know he's got a lot to share. But I've got a deep sense of gratitude for you and for everything that you've shared and everything that you are. And where can people find out more about you or find your books or whatever you would like to direct them to?
Well, first of all, Paul, I would like to say that you've always been someone that I really appreciate, just your dedication and your walk and your practice. I really admire that. So thank you for allowing me to call you and talk to you about knee pain and other things.
Yeah.
But as far as finding me, we can put it all in the text. I've written books, but I had my last book was called My Foot's Too Big for the Glass Slipper. Everything's under Gabby Reece, GabbyReece. If anyone wants to check out, and we still like to get you for the pool training, xptlife.com. But I want to end by saying one thing more than self-promoting myself. And I appreciate your kind words, but I also want to say that I really, as I go through each day, I feel that I'm well-intended. I know that I make mistakes all the time, and also that I am always questioning if I'm seeing what I'm seeing and feeling what I'm feeling, because I don't know. And I think that that's, if I could just remind people that it's okay not to know, it's okay to ask questions, but that it still goes back to some of those, to those 4 doctors that you're talking about. I would encourage people to follow that, because that at least gives you a solid foundation, like the truth, to at least kind of have a fighting chance to be upright in parts of your day, you know?
Amen.
And just, you know, however we're feeling and whatever we're going through is okay. And it's just making sure, if it's not the way we want it or it's difficult, can we find the right people to help us, to connect us with some of the answers? And that's a moving target, you know, it's all a moving target. So I appreciate your questions, and I will help facilitate you locking down Laird.
Thank you. Hey, lots of love to you and Laird and your family. And hopefully we can do another interview along the way. I'm sure that people will send me lots of questions after this one. And there's all sorts of stuff I'd love to talk to you about. So
okay. And I'm going to interview you in 12 or 13 years when you're parenting a teenage girl.
Well, you'll probably be interviewing me before then, because I'll be calling you going, Gabby, what do I do?
Yeah. You've definitely got some stuff figured out, Paul.
Well, I have to go through the same process you're going through every day. It's just that because I have 4 doctors in place, I have the energy to be committed to really resolving it so that I don't feel split open and confused and wounded. And I think these challenges are essential for us to grow deeper into ourselves. And what I've learned is the deeper you grow into yourself, the more you realize that your connection to the world is critical.
Yeah.
And when you grow into the connection to the world and say, well, where did that come from? You realize that the world is a product of the entire universe. And therefore, the experience we're having is the universe's experience. And it is here to support us because it is living through us. And when you're connected to the earth and connected to the universe, and you really see that there's majesty in the mystery of it all, it makes it worth being part of every day. And if you look back on your life, you can easily find times where you thought, shit, this is just terrible. How am I going to get through this? And the next thing you know, you're getting married or giving birth or starting a new business, and you realize there's just an undulation and a rhythm to it all. And the ups aren't forever and the downs aren't forever. But as we grow, we learn to, we learn to surf, don't we?
Yeah, that's right. And to remind everybody who's listening that we all really do have something to contribute, even if it's not clear from time to time, or it hasn't become clear. And that's why even trying to connect with yourself is important, because then I think that's where you get some of those answers,
Yes. Well, thank you, Gabby. I don't want to keep you too long. I know Laird's home and he's out there doing
always be ready.
Yeah, always be ready. So give everybody a hug and lots of love.
You too. Aloha.
Thank you for listening to Living 4D with Paul Chek and today's guest, Gabrielle Reece. You can follow Gabrielle on Instagram at Gabby Reece, and her website is gabriellereece.com. Follow Paul on Instagram and Twitter at Living4D Podcast, or on his YouTube podcast channel, youtube.com/Living4D with Paul Chek. You can watch more on Paul's blog at paulcheksblog.com and the Chek Institute's blog at chekinstitute.com/blog.